Yes, welcome all. Welcome to a Q&A session. I think this is actually the first Q&A session that we've done this year so far, because we did do like a little Q&A, which was kind of live with the fireside chat. But this one, we're actually doing it like we did last year with the themes, where we were having devs on with us. And today, we are joined by the same people that were on the podcast. CCP Massey, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. So I'm Massey. I am the senior game designer or combat designer on Vanguard.
And Vipex.
Yeah, lovely to meet everyone. My name's CCP Vipex. I'm the art director on EVE Vanguard, and I love baths.
He does love
That's me.
baths.
Okay.
Weirdly so.
Not like the area, just baths.
Yeah, just baths.
I like bath.
The true Roman. And I'm CCP Peaceful, the community developer. I like showers, not so much baths, but the
I like the rainfall showers.
Oh yeah,
in particular. Yeah, big fan of those.
Is it waterfall shower? Is that a thing? Waterfall shower?
Yeah, just whatever those. Yeah, it comes directly onto you. Need those.
Peaceful is lying. Get out, Toodaloo. I shower now and again. Yeah, so we're going to be doing our first Q&A. This one's actually in relation to combat and weapons. Like the podcast, when we had the podcast go out, we asked everybody about their burning questions, what they had on their minds, like the thoughts, ideas. We have the special people here on the channel with us now. So we're going to try and answer a couple of those questions. So should we get into it? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, go for it.
Let's do it. Some of these questions are really long, so I did shorten them a little bit. But starting with a Piombo. So Piombo asks, is retrieving all the dust assets and armaments one of the long-term goal during creating the Vanguard assets? Not that I want only them. Also, much time passed and new technologies and factions surely arrived, even to the grounded units. Imagining needing Com Gun or Driglavian Orbs. Just will there be a day where we will be able to have also all the legacy assets?
Yeah, so there's two sides to this, right? There's like, we have a backlog of all of the old actual dev assets and stuff, but then you've got the archetypes of all of the weapons and everything from Dust. So from a kind of gameplay perspective, as time goes by, we'll want to increase the roster of the weapons and the tools and the equipment, and we'll definitely want to revive, certain things from Dust for sure. It would be crazy not to. Initially, the team's focused on new stuff because we kind of want to give ourselves, that strong foundation of setting the tone exactly where we want Vanguard to be, and then interspersing the Dust stuff to kind of fill in a bunch of the gaps and bring that nostalgia back for the people that love Dust. We're not trying to kind of, completely break away by any means. This is all within Eve, so we're going to see a lot of that stuff coming back at some point, but it's not necessarily going to be the first thing. We're really looking to work out we're building all brand new systems and everything for this game. We're doing everything on Unreal 5. Everything kind of has to be done from scratch again. So we're gonna, go through and build a bunch of weapons that we think really kind of sell the fantasy and put the stamp on what Vanguard is supposed to be from a gameplay perspective and how that shapes the weapon roster. But there'll absolutely be room for all your favorites, from Dust. And the best thing that the community can do to facilitate that is just be super vocal about specifics from Dust of the things that they really want to see going forward, because obviously there's favorites that are going to be in consideration internally anyway, but there's going to be a bunch of stuff that we just haven't been talking about enough that we need people to champion their old favorite things to make sure that they're on our minds.
I think we're really lucky actually in that respect, where because we've got Dust and other stuff to kind of pull from in terms of inspiration, it works as a good, I guess, kind of springboard for us to kind of talk about what we like, what we don't like, what we would change, what we exaggerate, what we want to do that kind of fits, EVE Vanguard. So it's, we're very fortunate to have that kind of, I guess, IP and that kind of history of using what do we want to do kind of going forward.
Excellent. I think they'll be really happy with that answer. That is good to know. Because there's a lot of talk on weapons right now, especially with Levi making up all these drafts and stuff. Yeah, it's great. The next question then, again, this is from Piombo again, is Dust 514. Dust 514 combat was similar to the EVE one, right fit to the right enemy. Will the fitting and the armaments, gun, ammo type, boosters, etc. crucial to fight a specific enemy? Should I prepare a different fit for a different deployment depending the danger I'll encounter?
Yeah, so this is a really interesting one from a design point of view of like how much do we want to lean into, you know, shooter skill being at the forefront of like what it means to be good at the game and successful, and like how do you balance that off against like the game knowledge and the kind of meta aspects of the game. The intent is that, yeah, fitting for the activity or the goal or the enemy that you're working towards or fighting is going to have a strong impact. But we're not trying to make like a rock paper scissors style shooter. You know, we're not trying to push it further into that kind of realm. Fitting should just be about optimizing your advantages, which could be small or large depending on the context of what it is that you're doing at the time. And we want there to be a lot of interesting decision making and tools for players to use before combat happens, so that they can be more likely to succeed. But then the shooter aspect of, you know, if I've got, you know, a relatively light build and someone's got a really heavy build, I can still outplay them. But, you know, it depends how I've kind of chosen to spec my advantages and the things that you're doing, especially in PvE, where things are going to be a bit more, you know, specific, where you're going, okay, well, I'm going to obviously go and, you know, fight in this area, so I'm going to want to fit this, this, and this. Whereas with the PvP side, we don't want it to get into a situation where you turn the corner and you see each other and go, okay, well, I lose, before you've even kind of got into the shootery aspect of it all. So it's going to be a bit of a tightrope, but absolutely, this is still fitting, and fitting for the right things and earning your advantages that way is absolutely going to be a part of combat. And at the moment, I think that's one of the things that we'll be kind of moving towards from what you're seeing right now. Like at the moment, because that, you know, there's not a ton on the kind of fitting and customization side, the shooter skill is absolutely the vector that decides success and loss, and we want to bring in a lot more of that kind of cerebral gameplay into Vanguard moving forward.
Yeah, because I imagine like it's not just about having the right fit for combat. It's probably like having the right fit for whatever kind of activity that you're doing, right? Like if you're doing PvE and you're mining, maybe you want to have some kind of mining fit, right? So it's like, I guess it's going to be really tricky to find that kind of balance, to know how you can protect yourself if you do decide to just go on a mining mission.
Yeah,
Cool.
we don't want people who have decided to kind of go into a mining fit to then be like, oh, okay, well, because I've spec'd into a mining fit, I'm gonna be kind of useless in combat. It's like, no. Like you get to choose on that scale, right, of how far you're going to push into mining. You can go all the way to the point where you're probably going to lose every engagement, but then that's like a purposeful decision that you've made to take everything to the extreme. Whereas like it should still be, okay, I spent 95% of my resources or whatever it is, you know, that's managing this stuff on optimizing my mining, but I still kept 5% so that I have a pistol. And
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, I can still outplay a tank with a pistol if I do it the right way. But yeah, we're not trying to kind of make it in a very kind of rock paper scissors way. We don't think that would be interesting for the shooter side of the game.
Cool. Next question then. So this one comes from Heb. Are there likely to be short-term / permanent event weapon items, blueprints, etc., such as a weapon that might be completely unbalanced, but it is super fun, short-term in a specific environment and makes for some crazy gameplay, or event / reward weapons visual items? I know there are some event skins already, for example, snowball launcher that might cover someone in snow.
Yeah. Yeah, this is really interesting. I think there's a bunch of different ways that we could talk about this.
I like this.
Yeah, because immediately to my mind, before I even kind of finished reading that, was like, yeah, a snowball gun for a Christmas event. I was like, okay, is that the kind of thing that we're going to be kind of thinking about? And it's like, yeah, sure. Like down the line, like I'm sure we'll do that. We'll do that kind of stuff. How it fits into like the core gameplay. One of the goals that I have for how we introduce like super overpowered weapons for a brief amount of time, or yeah, that kind of thing of going, here's some kind of crazy different gameplay for this kind of short period of time. I've spoken to Ratati about how we approach like releasing new weapons, and one of the things that we're both excited about is the idea that we could deliver like prototype versions of weapons that are in development as like surprise supply caches in like insurgency maps, kind of treating them like power weapons. So you go, okay, in the middle of this insurgency, suddenly you see that there's an event where something is crashing down, and you go and inspect it, and you go, this is a weapon that literally isn't in the game yet. And you sort of pick it up, and it's got, banana textures and stuff on it, but you're mowing everybody down, and you're like, holy crap, like, what is this thing? And you get a little bit of that kind of excitement that there's always something fresh that could be in the game that you've kind of never seen before. And we can use that to like gather early balance data and get early player sentiment on stuff that's like partway through development before we commit to them being available as part of, blueprints on the market and things like that. So how we approach that in terms of like, deployments where maybe everyone gets given a certain weapon for the sake of an event or something, like I absolutely think that that's something that we can do. But in the short term, I think the only thing that we've kind of really properly spoken about is this idea that we want to keep up the open development stuff through the life cycle of the game, and introduce kind of event weapons in that way, I think.
And I think with that, like when it comes to like event themed skins, I think short term it's definitely something that we will continue to do. But I think in the long run, what I would love to do is do something similar to the how EVE Online has like their skinner system. So, I don't want players to sort of rely on us or rely on an event to kind of, modify their weapon. Really, I think we should be kind of working towards creating the tools for players to make their own skins. Whether it's just color preference, maybe they kind of create their own, clan colors, patterns, whatever. I think that is something which we would love to do. But yeah, I think at the moment, I guess it's kind of more focusing on the foundations to eventually do that. But yeah, short term event skins, absolutely fine. But long term, giving players tools so then that kind of unlocks any possibility really.
I can see like a little similarity here when we do like the AT tournament in EVE Online. There's there's AT ships, right? And those AT ships are like very overpowered, but like once they're gone, right? So it's like I'm just curious on how like that similarity could come into Vanguard. Like you have this special weapon, it's an event weapon, but then once you've lost it, it's gone, right? Just thinking as you're talking, really cool.
We've been talking a bunch recently about like whether there's a difference between weapons that you're kind of keeping over the long term of the progression of your character, and like what stuff is like completely volatile, what stuff is like partially volatile that you're going to be keeping for a while. And I think that's one of the things that we go, let's just build in that sort of scalability where some things you're going to keep regardless, some things you're going to lose straight away. And I think that gives us a bunch of opportunity to go like every so often, like for example, it could just be like when you're manufacturing your weapons, like you might manufacture an instance of a weapon that you would lose on death that happens to roll 50% better stats than normal and has a bunch of attachments that you would never normally be getting. But you're going, okay, like this is amazing, but it's volatile. So like how, and then I'm going to spend a bunch of time into upkeep and like spending a bunch of systems that we haven't really worked out. But like, you might have the equivalent of like insurance and things like that. And you're going, oh God, I've got this, it's like I've accidentally won a Ferrari in a competition and now I've got to spend 10 grand a month on insurance to keep it. Like, I think there's loads of opportunity for us to do stuff like that with the equivalent of like power weapons, where someone just discovers it and then goes, oh my God, I've got this one thing that I can't, recreate through manufacturing because I don't have, any that's not a thing that I have access to. So yeah, I think there's a bunch of opportunity for us to do that stuff moving forward for sure.
Very cool. Okay, the next question then. This one comes from Thad. Thad, I apologize. I had to shorten this because, as always, you've done a great job of explaining of everything that you normally write down. But the shortened version of this. So the uplink podcast mentioned faction variant weapons. Will these be purely under the hood stat changes, or will they look and feel unique in game, like a core complexion gun appearing as an Imperial armaments rifle? Could we also see older service rifles, rail, scrambler, plasma, return or inspire new variants?
Yeah, so this is an interesting one because the concept of like faction variant weapons, I think, is still kind of in its infancy. So we still have a lot of room to figure out where we want to go with this. But my kind of current working analogy for how the faction variant stuff will work is like purchasing PC parts, purchasing aftermarket PC parts. So you might go and buy, I don't know, a 4090. But you could either buy, the stock version of the 4090, or you go to MSI and buy afterburner version of a 4090 or something. Like, I'm not up to date with my PC parts and stuff, but like that's the kind of general idea. Is like you'll have someone, some faction, subsidiary, someone producing the base version of the weapon, and then leaning into the idea that kind of anyone can use anything within the context of the medium. We don't have to have these like super hard faction lines drawn between who can use what weapons, and go, cool. I get the point. Maybe it would feel weird if Amar were putting together a specification for core complexion product, but we're trying to lean into that and go, well, what does that look like? And maybe it doesn't work for us, right? Maybe we have to be a little bit more restrictive about who we let change things. But I think that's kind of how we're looking at it now. Is like they're taking it as like a second-hand kind of modding and tuning specialism, and kind of we're still figuring out a lot of the visual stuff. But like I like the idea of having it look like it's been parasitically kind of taken over and like enveloped by the aftermarket, process to have those kind of physical modifications as well as stat modifications and skin changes and things like that. So that's kind of where we're thinking at the moment. But where we want to go long term, like I like the idea of us doing full reskins with just like the platform underneath. But like I said, like we'll figure out kind of how this develops. And it will start small and it will become more ambitious as we kind of prove out what it is that we want to do with it. I'm sure Ben's going to have opinions on how we can do that.
It's an interesting one. It's definitely a challenge because I think when you look at kind of like an empire like Mimitar, naturally that is a very sort of like kit bashy sort of style. So we could totally like embrace that more, and that kind of totally works for Mimitar. But the other side of the coin is almost like, well, how does that work with Amar? Almost like if we are thinking of Amar as the opposite of Mimitar, where it's almost a single sculpted piece that is like visually beautiful, that is just like one elegant piece. How would that look if we started sticking stuff on it? It's like, I guess we just have to be comfortable with it, right? And especially if we're going to go down the route of eventually having opportunity for players to add their own skins in their own colors. For me, it's almost like we've got to care less about the colorization of the weapons because we know it could be anything in the future, and care more about the function and the visual look and in terms of like the silhouette and form and function. So a lot of stuff that we've been talking about recently is like how important it is for the weapon to kind of have like unique reloading, the way it reloads per like faction, or the way the ammo counter is. That stuff I think is going to be more important than say stuff like colors and stuff, because of the whole faction variant modding stuff we do later. It's an interesting challenge for sure.
When you were talking there, just like when you were talking about like secondhand parts, immediately like Minmatar comes to mind, but also like as you were saying, like I'm not going to mention the game, but in a certain game you get like minimal wear, battle scarred, right? You get like certain like types of different like skins and stuff. And I thought, okay, imagine you can like design your weapon, but the design is going to come out not as great, or the quality isn't going to be as great because of the specific usage of the weapon. Like it's been battle scarred, so you're not going to get like a top quality spray on it, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's really interesting actually, because when you kind of mention that kind of battle scarred, that stuff, for me, that kind of makes sense when we're talking about even like how the clone is created. When the clone is created in a sort of an artificial process, you kind of expect there to be sort of imperfections and sort of weird things that go on, and then it kind of opens up the conversation of, well, what does that mean then? How does that affect gameplay, or the things that the player can do or can't do? And the same with weapons. And it's almost like this idea that, especially in the kind of the art Bible I speak quite a lot about the artists about, is having this sort of contrast of like the nature versus sort of man synthetic, and having sort of the beauty of natural and then this sort of evil, sinister feel of the synthetic. So when it comes to like playing God and creating clones and creating this stuff, there's almost like this sort of imperfection thing to it, which I think we could totally lean on.
Yeah, and we're trying to lean on that from a gameplay perspective. We think with the way that you'll be, some things you kind of get and they're brand new, and then you lose them while they're still basically brand new, and then other things you're going to be keeping hold of for a longer time, and like, the idea is that you're kind of progressing with them. And we go, well, what does that look like, and what does that feel like? And the idea of there being some sort of, imperfection, degradation, upkeep, and things like that is definitely something that we want to look at from a gameplay perspective. So we'll have to think of it visually too. So yeah, I think that's super relevant.
Awesome. Okay, so the next question then. This one comes from Pyombo again. So it is, will the defeated target drop its fit like the destroyed ships of EVE Online? Drop suit could be 100% deleted as it's like the ship, but what about the rest? Chipset, utilities, equipment it carried.
Yeah, so exactly what's going to drop and what's going to be retained is still very much in kind of a placeholder state, to be honest, with the way that the game works right now. Like, so everything that you've seen, like, can be taken with a big pinch of salt. Like, it's not necessarily showing where we want to go. Like I said, like, there's bigger conversations around what it is that you keep and what it is that you're kind of losing that we haven't got fully figured out, and we want to move away from any of the things that are there right now that are kind of keeping that extraction shootery kind of feeling on the way that, the loot in and the loot out kind of feels. And it's a challenge, because what we want to do, we don't want players to be completely reset on death. Like, we don't want it to be that hardcore of an experience. Like, that we're leaning into the fact that, like, infomorphs don't have to care too much about expending clones. Like, so that has to come across with the way that the loot management works as well. Otherwise the fantasy doesn't work, and you care too much about each individual war clone rather than using them as a resource. So we're trying to lean into that stuff and have the clones be able to be disposable. But as a result, we don't want your equipment to just be completely disposable as well. So we've had a bunch of conversations internally, and the ideas are kind of unproven. But yeah, we don't want it to be about you losing your fit with each clone. It's more about, these more granular kind of losses. You'll still probably be dropping like gubbins that you're finding around the place. The stuff that's in the equivalent of your backpack is probably going to get dropped. And we've had some cool conversations about, like, well, if we're not fully dropping like weapons or suits, what do we give as a reward for players who kind of win PvP battles? And I think there's opportunity for us to try to do something where you can kind of transfer the signature of the weapon and the fit back to the MCC, back to whatever we want to be doing in terms of your home base, and then maybe from there you're able to create like limited, volatile, battle scarred instances of other people's stuff for future deployment. So we still get a little bit of that. I want to try their stuff. I want to have a window into a bunch of stuff that I haven't unlocked yet, and be rewarded for killing people that have cool stuff, but not have it be like I'm constantly losing my thing and then having to go get my gun back from that guy, and then it feels like a bunch of toddlers trading Pokemon cards and stuff. It's like, I don't want it to feel like that. It should feel you're there with your fit because you've spent time customizing it, and we want to repay the fact that you've spent time figuring all of this stuff out. We don't want to just be dropping it immediately. So it's still pretty kind of unproven what we're going to do with that. But yeah, we're exploring a whole range of possibilities with that stuff. And I'd love to hear suggestions on what people think we should be doing with that, because I think there's still lots of room for us to figure out what's going on there. But ultimately, we don't want it to just be, you die and you drop all of your stuff and you lose it and it's gone. Like, I don't think that's where this game needs to go.
Yeah, I was going to say, actually, because based on what you just said, I mean, like, what does the community want, right? Like, it seems quite open ended right now, up in the air. Like, what does the community want to see? Pyombo, if you're listening, then definitely get a thread up of what you think should be dropped. Next question then. So this one comes from Ardanis, and it says, will there be support weapons in EVE Vanguard that require 2 players to operate? For example, could one player carry a Galente plasma launcher while another reloads or manages cooling systems?
It's a really interesting idea. Like, it's like when we're starting to talk about new weapons, which is exciting in itself, right? It's some of the things that me and Massey are talking about recently is how weird and how crazy can we go? Do we want to go? You know, and does that fit a certain faction, a certain feel, you know, weapon type? It's interesting. I think, yeah. I mean, I don't know if we, you know, how things are going to progress with what we're talking about now, but we always want, I guess, encourage squad play, and I think that's something that we can do better on. What that means is multiple different things, right? Whether it's weapons, whether it's deployables, whether it's just tactics. It's, you know, it's interesting. It has got me thinking of what that could mean for certain factions, but yeah, it's just kind of conversation point at this point, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's another very similar question from our Dennis as well.
Okay.
On that I don't mind if you wouldn't mind reading that out, and we can kind of tackle them at the same time, because I think they're pretty closely related.
How does it start?
So it says, like, will heavy or specialized weapons require setup phases?
Got you. Yep. So will heavier or specialized weapons require setup phases, power sources, or coordination between squad mates, mimicking the complexity of EVE ship modules?
Yeah, so I see those kind of things as being related, right? It's like anywhere that you've got kind of that squad cooperation, and whether it's like isolated to a weapon or just any other sort of mechanic, like I think I see it less in the context of your own like weapons that you're equipping, but I think we could definitely lean into that with the idea of, like, you know, deployables or you know, tactical equipment, where we could have much more significant things that require a bunch of squad cooperation to be able to charge them or bring them online, and things like that. And kind of, you know, the first kind of seeds of that kind of thing, I guess, are like the air to orbit weaponry, like the cannons in the insurgencies, where, you know, you have to have an amount of, you know, cooperation to be able to take that in a full match, but you're not really kind of doing a lot with it. So I think there's going to be lots of room when it comes to the activities and the tools that you're using that will require that level of squad cooperation. I don't think it's going to move so far to individual weapons requiring that level of team play, but, you know, it's definitely not off the table. We've been joking about having an extra long sniper barrel where you need a second person to stand in front of you and hold it up to aim. But I don't know that we'll ever get there in terms of like that normal weapon working that way. But there's definitely going to be room for us to do things like that outside of like your standard equipped weapons, I think.
Or create the tripod class where you're just
Yeah.
holding things up.
That's so funny. Yeah, I would lose so many friendships if that was the case. If we needed something specifically for a certain objective, that'd be so funny. Okay, next question then. This one is from Eleanor. Are chipsets going to be the only way for adapting weapons? Or do you see the room for weapon attachments like grenade launcher or Nova bayonet, enemy scanner maybe?
Yeah, so chipsets are, as like the tunings as they kind of are now, the data and the stat changes, that's kind of just a starting point. Like the intent is to have more physical modifications and gameplay attachments too. And we've been working internally, we've been working on systems to actively support that. We just kind of need more time to cook those things and build more prototypes that kind of prove out that we're confident in those systems. It's a trickier thing to build than I think people kind of would know. Especially when we're trying to tie it into a relatively kind of free form customization system as well. There's lots and lots of things to figure out, but that is absolutely where we want to be going. That the weapons will have kind of more physical adaptions and different gameplay attachments. Like the first kind of seed of that is, you know, with the optics that we have in the game now. Like that's not just a stat change; it is changing the optic that you're using. But obviously, like it's not as impactful as a whole, like underslung grenade launcher and things. But yeah, that's definitely kind of where we want to go. Chipsets as just data changes is like it's the groundwork for us to be able to continue doing other things as well.
Cool. Another one from Eleanor. What are those two crossed slots for in loadouts? Just a placeholder or something specific you will develop later as planned? What are those two crossed slots? Oh, at the bottom?
Yeah.
Like at the bottom. Okay.
When you're also, okay, it was worth clarifying. Like I read this as when when you're customizing, you have 5 open slots, and then you have 2
Oh,
that
okay.
are crossed out on the adaptation stuff. So yeah, if it's to do with that, the way that I'm looking at it is that as we improve the adaptive weaponry stuff, we're planning on there being more flexibility to the number of slots at a minimum. Like, we just wanted to show that like we're not just like completely fixing it, and there is room for you to be able to customize not just what's in the slots, but also the shape of the slots and how all of that stuff kind of works. We really ultimately we want to promote the creativity and the flexibility in the future versions of the system, where you're challenged to optimize and configure to get the weapon that you want. Like we said on the podcast, like at the moment it's kind of just open slots and then put the biggest, scariest things that you have created in them, and there's no kind of real limit to that. Moving forward, it'll be much more about like, oh, do I want to, kind of well, with some parallels to how kind of e-fitting works, going, well, do I want to spend all of my customization resourcing on 2 big bad upgrades, or do I want to extend the number of slots and put 7 or 8 of these kind of smaller things in? Like, that's where we kind of want to get to, that it's not just each weapon has this like fixed frame of things that I can kind of put things in, but that you can customize the frame, and you can customize how the chipsets and the attachments are going to work. So that was just a small little kind of nod to the fact that like you might be able to increase the number of slots by doing something. But yeah, it's a system that we're super excited to work on. Like, I really think that's going to make a massive difference when we can get to that point where you're optimizing and you're thinking about how you want to do your fit, rather than just putting the biggest things in.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, we're definitely wanting to work towards that, and we don't want to hide away from it. So I'm hopeful that as we introduce further improvements to the systems and like different customization stuff in the future, we can also continue to be putting in like little windows into where we're going in the build as well, rather than just waiting for the next update to kind of show what it is, so that we can get that feedback.
Excellent. Okay, cool. So I'm gonna stop with the questions just for a brief moment. Since we have CCP Vipex here, and he is the art director, we have some content here that hasn't actually been shown to the founders yet. But we thought it might be cool to give you a little sneak peek into something that CCP Vipex has been working on, or one of the many things that he's been working on. I'll share the image on screen now. Vipex, would you be happy to explain a little bit about what's going on?
Yeah, sure.
Let's have a look.
Have you got it on screen?
I will bring it up. Can you see it?
Yes.
Excellent.
Yeah, so the concept art team have been very hard at work, especially since Christmas. Just sort of looking at, I guess, parts of the game that are, what can I say, a bit void at the moment. Like, for example, we were kind of talking about extraction and what that could be and what that could look like from a first-person view. And one of the ideas I think design had is, well, I think we've already got it in game at the moment, actually, is the extraction beacon. And then kind of open up the conversation of what other ways can you extract? Like, will we have slower extractions where something's picking you up, or do we have a fast sort of like expensive way to extract that maybe costs more money, but yeah, it's like a get out quick sort of thing. So there's this idea that with the extraction beacon that we've got, the concept artist had this idea that it could almost be like a thing that you could kind of plug yourself into, and then your consciousness is kind of extracted, and then your kind of body just kind of like ragdolls and just kind of lays dead. But you've got all of your, providing that you've already kind of stored your chipsets and stuff like that. So again, it's kind of playing on the idea that the suit is an expendable thing. Like it doesn't really matter. What matters is what you're doing in the session, what you're collecting, what you're extracting. That's sort of the main thing. So the body is really kind of worthless compared to the thing that, information that you're kind of extracting with.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the ideas that John done with this concept is this very sort of kind of like this praying idea has kind of sparked a lot of ideas of what this could mean for other parts of the game. And one of those ideas is something that I kind of talk about when we're talking about the different areas of the game. That for me is like the heaven. That is like the future heaven is being more in a sort of like a sinister digital sort of realm, I guess. And then with, I guess, decades and decades of ego, Earth as we know it suddenly shifts to like a more of a like a hell vibe.
Mm-hmm.
So then when you're in hell and you're trying to then extract to heaven, there's this sort of like praying and trying to connect to heaven to kind of, leave hell, which is the planets that you're in. So there's lots of kind of like biblical sort of sinister tone stuff we're kind of looking at now, that I'd love to really kind of home in, especially for early access, and what that could mean when it comes to like our box cover art, our posters, how can we add that darker tone into this game so it doesn't just become another sci-fi shooter. We've got something a bit more horror-esque about it. So yeah, concept art team have been very hard at work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's excellent.
Yeah, I really like this. The explorations that have gone on between those different types of the different mentalities about leaving the surface and going. Like, there will absolutely be situations where you want to get your clone and your suit out, right? Like, you might have a suit that, like I said, like you might have found the Ferrari and you're going, okay, when I go on a deployment now, I have to get my suit out. And there'll be other situations where you're going in, and you're basically just ratting and you're going, I've just taken the cheapest suit because I don't care, so I can just plug myself in and get out of there. Like, I really like how, if we have those different ways of players kind of having the agency to decide what matters at the end of a session, it can be super interesting.
And also, like the thing that we've been talking about is, or the thing that I like to keep talking about with the art team, is this sort of like contrast of like the digital world and the digital heaven and the physical hell. And then that kind of plays into a lot of themes that we're talking about, even when it comes to like combat and how should wreckage feel in hell, and almost exaggerating the physical kind of presence of that stuff. So things feel a lot more gritty, a lot more heavy, a lot more violent.
Yeah, excellent. But yeah, I thought it'd be really cool to just share some of that stuff, because it is always really. I mean, you peeps have got some really cool stuff coming out of the art side, which is always really fun to see, and we have been sharing a lot of it with the VIPs especially. So, which again is a very good segue into get into the VIP program. Join the Discord, have a look at the community hub channel. If you're already in the Discord right now, this doesn't apply to you, but if you're watching on YouTube, join the Discord, check out the community hub channel, and head to the community hub link. There's a player survey, and you've got to complete a couple of missions before you can actually apply. But we are very, very close to approving a new batch of players into the VIP program. And we appreciate everyone that has already applied. It's been overwhelmingly positive, which is great. So just back onto the questions then. So the next question we have, this is from Eleanor again. So do you plan adding more melee options, like more combat moves, like kicks, trips, jabs, blocks? I don't mean making MMA simulator, just more variety. Having someone jumping at me with a knife, it would be nice to have an option to counter it with at least a block if I am cornered. Now it just gets down to who spams V faster.
Yeah, we've been talking recently, kind of, very, very much in kind of ideation about like, well, what are like melee weapons and what does melee look like in the game? And I think like the things that we've been thinking about more are like individual melee weapons and what each weapon could do, like what melee option each weapon could do, and whether we have a little bit of depth there, and whether it's just slightly different melee attacks, or whether we have something a little bit deeper. I think if we were to have a deeper melee system, it would be further down the road. But never say never. I think at the forefront of it, we want to make sure that short range combat remains about the guns and the weapons, rather than kind of going everything within 10 meters ends up, not MMA simulator, but a little bit kind of more, hand-to-hand combat. I think if we were to get there, it would be further down the road. Like, we want to give, shotguns and stuff a place to be able to shine. Yeah, it's not something that I think we're actively putting too much thought in right now. But like I said, never say never.
Cool. Excellent. Eleanor again. How about ability to grab objects scattered around the map and use them as melee weapons or throwables or shields? I in my head, there's like so many different games that I've used like objects around the world to just throw at people, and I just find it hilarious every time. So it's a very good question.
Yeah, I like you said, like I think there's loads of games that try to do this. I think the game that I remember having the most fun with it, probably not the most deep example, but like Crisis 3 PvP, which whatever, it wasn't the most successful thing in the world, but they really kind of leaned into being able to have some improvised objects around the world that you could really use to just shake things up in those PvP engagements. We haven't really explored this, but I do like that idea of having some level of improvised tools on the battlefield. So yeah, that's a hard maybe, and we'll see, and I'll think about it because I do like that.
Yeah, especially like when we're talking about crash sites and what materials and stuff that leaves behind. Sometimes it's almost like you're looking at, the shrapnel and, the chemicals of the wreckage, and you're kind of thinking maybe this could be a good weapon if I do something with it in the right way. It does definitely spark conversation. I'd love to do that stuff.
Yeah. And I think like maybe not like so much of weapons, but like we have been experimenting. I think it's okay to say this if I don't go into details, but we have been experimenting with different things, I guess, around the map. In terms of like how you can potentially injure your opponent without actually firing a weapon, I guess. That's interesting to see. I guess it's kind of like, like the acid pool. So there's the sulfur swamps, right? Cool. The next question then, Ardanis. Will planets controlled by Vanguard clones evolve over time? For example, changing weather, terraforming, or factional control, offering strategic depth to repeated missions or invasions.
Yeah, I think when it comes to environments and kind of like the planetary sort of atmospherics and that sort of stuff, something that we have always talked about, especially because I come from like an environment art background, so I have like a soft spot for the environments and the kind of the planets. But it's something that we always talked about is the idea of environments feeling alive, and like what does that mean? Because I feel like a lot of games focus on like the character narrative, but then the world usually feels quite static. And I think how can we create an environment that kind of feels like it just feels different each time you jump into like the same environment, maybe 2 times over the space of a few weeks or months or whatever. Like what happens if we were to change up the weather, the time of day? What does that mean for, I guess, combat or weapons or gear? Like I think it can open up a lot of opportunity for us to kind of make players feel differently about the same environment based on like these different sort of things that could be random, each time you jump in. So whenever we're thinking of maps or planets or weathers or anything like this, it's almost like I guess it's like similar to like a Rubik's cube. Like the more kind of cubes you got, the more kind of random possibilities and kind of opportunities that brings. And it's almost like the more things we can add into the planets and the maps that could be different, there's lots of things that kind of what opportunities that could kind of bring to us.
Yeah, and on a kind of more short term note, in terms of like whether these planets are going to be evolving over a longer period of time or whether they're evolving over a shorter period of time. I think one of the things that we want to kind of look at is not just the environment feeling like it's kind of staying the same, but that there's like player and NPC driven kind of events that really change up the gameplay in a significant way over a shorter period of time. We have wanted to look at this idea that players who take over like significant points of interest on the map are then able to in a really kind of abstract way, just basically apply modifiers to the immediate area that change up the gameplay and change the way that people who want to kind of retake the area would have to approach it in different ways. It's all kind of ideation at this stage, but we, along with this idea that over the session escalating itself and having like the NPC presence change and having the focus of the session change, that also there's these kind of more controllable events that give people the opportunity to go, well, we're going to go and overtake this, this deployment space and make it our own by purposefully flipping this thing to X and turning on this thing that means that players kind of have to come into our house and approach things the way that we want them to kind of take it back from us. So yeah, there's a bunch of player controlled stuff that again is kind of in ideation at this stage. But we want to make sure that when you go into these deployments, you're not kind of just going down to the same place over and over again and letting players be those factors that are changing things.
I feel like we have already kind of shown that as well, especially like with Groundbreak when we had, prior to calling it like Aftermath and Carrion, we had like Carrion Day, Carrion Night, right? But now they are very different because they have different elements to them. But I remember like stepping foot on Carrion Day for the first time and I was like, I've never seen this map so bright. And it's just because it's so dark when you originally played it. It's a completely different aspect. And again, with the Solstice, and then you have Maelstrom now with the storm, the monsoon, it looks completely different. But again, different activities for different maps, which I think we have already kind of given to the players a little teaser. Cool. The next question then, how are we doing for time? Okay, we're good. So, tactical equipment. Are there going to be more types of grenades, like EMP that will blow off shields or glitch the HUD/visor to make it hard to see? Smoke grenades for confusing enemies which outnumber me.
Yeah, so this type of lethal or non-lethal disruption gameplay is something that I'm really keen for us to move towards, as we try and make that pre-combat kind of much more cerebral. Like I mentioned earlier, like at the moment it's very much like a shooter, like you kind of walk around a corner and then you suddenly see someone and you go, okay, now we have to have this shooter dance and see who wins. I very, very much want to move towards this idea of using tools and using equipment to kind of start the conversation with enemies much sooner, and it be about kind of delaying and outplaying other players by using those kinds of tools. I have dreams of us doing like customizable equipment as well as customizable weapons and customizable suits as well, and being able to say, okay, well, I'm going to take in my grenades, or I'm going to take in the equivalent of my motion scanners or my my claymores, or whatever kind of tactical equipment stuff we have, but then being able to tune it, change the payload, change how the fuse works, change all of these kind of subsidiary effects, and have that be like something that you're able to kind of tweak, so that all of that kind of looking after yourself and all of the kind of non-combat aspects of the game are still very much like interesting, and you're in control about when players are going to appear, and how much sort of disruption you're doing to people before you're kind of starting to engage. Because what we don't want to do is just have everything be super, everything be resolved by the bombastic side of the game. Like there has to be that kind of intelligent gameplay. So yeah, for sure. Like I want to grow out the roster of having different grenades and then having like a bunch of different tactical equipment and equipable tools to really kind of extend and make that that whole combat sequence longer and more thoughtful, for sure.
Yeah, it's quite funny just to like touch on the previous question that we had about like the changing in weather and stuff. There's a game that I play where like there's a certain grenade, and if it's not I should say dynamite. If it's not waxed, water will put it out. So if you throw a normal dynamite, if there's water or you chuck it into a puddle or something, it just won't go off because the fuse gets put out. So you have to take a wax one in with you. So that just immediately came to mind. Pretty cool. Excellent. Next question is from Eleanor again. Is character movement mechanics considered part of combat, and is it complete yet? I mean, do you plan on expanding on movement options, like adding prone for sniping, bending torso sideways, vaulting for scaling, small obstacles like short walls, or climbing?
Yeah, it's definitely not complete. There's a lot of improvements that we want to make to both the core movement and movement actions, like mentioned in the question. As it relates to combat, like we don't really want this to be a game where you're using like super evasive maneuvers all of the time to avoid incoming fire. Like as a kind of to the point before about like trying to make it a bit more cerebral. It's like we don't want to lean so far into the super twitchy stuff and have that kind of be a way to just nullify all pre-combat. But we need players to be able to kind of comfortably and enjoyably move through and interact with the environment, so that you can use positioning, cover usage, and just general traversal and make sure that that's sleek. Ultimately, we don't want people to feel like they're dying because of how the character is moving, and it whether your character is moving weirdly or the other character is moving weirdly. Like there's a bunch of improvements for us to make on that side. And when it relates to combat, it will ultimately come down to like, let's just make sure that everyone feels in control of their character and can predict what's happening for the target without things kind of being glitchy or awkward.
It also kind of opens up the question of like what kind of movement for what character. Like if we are to go down like a heavier character route, maybe even as heavy as like say a mech, for example, like what does that mean for movement? If we've got a smaller character, what does that mean? And how small is small? Like, I think we want to definitely go down something that feels a little bit more chunky, a little bit more military, a little bit more heavy to kind of work with that kind of physical presence of being in hell and being sort of suited for hell as well. So when we are looking at the bigger sort of maybe exo suit thing, whatever that ends up being, it's like, what do we want to create some sort of difference there with our different characters, or do we have sort of a similar sort of what you would expect from our kind of roster? But the good thing is, because we certainly haven't completed the kind of the movement, it means then when we're looking at our kind of new character or characters or suits, it's like we can kind of start from fresh with that. Nothing's kind of in stone sort of thing.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Just imagining, like, you would never see a mech sniping, proning in the grass. That'd be really funny. But also, if we do had a vaulting mechanic, I'm all for it. Absolutely all for it. I like that there's vaulting and there's jumping, but we have to separate those keys, right? Because the last thing I want to do is stood by a window. I see someone and I have to jump, but instead I vault. I've died so many times because of that. As long as we separate them, we should be okay.
In every game I could, I was always splitting those keys. So as long as I'm making the decisions for those things, then that shouldn't be a problem for us. But yeah, that's exactly the kind of thing, right? It's like that doesn't necessarily affect combat loads with just having that kind of automatic climb up and mantling and things, but it makes it so much nicer to move through the environments. And especially when we're dealing with very harsh, rocky, organic kind of terrain, I think it's a no-brainer that we have to get there eventually. So I don't want anyone to think like, oh, the movement in this game isn't very good. It's like, it's very much at an early stage, and there's lots of improvements for us to make there.
Yeah,
Sure.
it's especially when we're looking at wreckage, on planets. Like there's a reason why most studios or games don't have wreckage and the kind of the geometry that we have in the planets, because it opens up so many conversations when when we talk about movement. It's probably why most games on the market now it's all kind of urban and kind of straight lines and that sort of stuff in the environment, which of course we want to have as well. But yeah, I think making it easier for players to kind of just run around wreckage and kind of feel comfortable is definitely a topic of conversation.
Excellent. So we've got a couple of minutes left. Are we good to answer one more? I think this is a pretty good one.
Yeah, fine by me.
Yeah, cool. So this one comes from Ouroboros. Are we ever going to get Triglavian weapons? Probably reverse engineered to be handled, since we are not Trigs yet, but maybe even entropic darts at some point in the future.
Yeah. So no details on like Triglavian weapons or anything yet, but like absolutely, this is the kind of thing that we want to be doing. I'd love to hear suggestions in the Discord about like what trig weapons you think we could do that would be interesting in the context of like boots on the ground combat for sure. Like that would be really interesting to see. But then on the topic of like entropic darts and stuff like that, where we have those like slightly weirder weapon payloads, like that's exactly the type of stuff that we want to be exploring, like with the weapon variety and how far we kind of want to push things. Not everything's going to be a bullet. We want to have a strong variety of those different projectile and damage types, and especially when it comes to building the weapons that come from each of the factions and their subsidiaries. Like that's one of the things that we're saying, like how can we create some sort of consistency between like how the different factions work and the way that their subsidiaries manufacture weapons. Can we create that kind of identity, and by doing that in ways that are not just these guys have yellow bullets, these guys have red bullets, like in a way that's kind of much more even, much more interesting in how the gameplay works. So like there's a ton of like, I guess, like detail and lore around how the factions would be using the different payloads, and for us we're very much in that kind of exploration stage where we're going, how much do we want to stick to the kind of established kind of armaments that the spaceship game has defined, and how and what where are the lines there? So for us, like stuff like entropic darts, it's like absolutely, how and where do we fit that into what we're doing so that we can have these non-bullety kind of payloads as a core part of the game, and it not just be like every other bullet based or hit scan based shooter.
Awesome. I was very jealous of how you easily said armaments there, because I think it took me a couple of attempts.
You were struggling with it.
I really was. I'd never seen that. Like, I hardly ever see that word before, and I was just like, armaments. And then Toodaloo messaged me and said, "Reading's hard, isn't it?" And I was like, "Yeah." But yeah, just rolled off your tongue. Amazing. But yeah, no, that's excellent. Was there anything else you guys wanted to answer, or was that pretty much everything? Because there was only a couple of questions left.
Most of the things.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's one small one to do with or there's one to do with like how scanning and dust was a specialist role, and like how much do we want that to be an important part of what we're doing. And it kind of relates back to what I was talking about, like with the pre-combat. It's like, absolutely, like I don't think we need it to necessarily kind of be a specialism, but it's going to play into the core combat loop, is gathering information on enemies that are nearby and using that to kind of help you make decisions. I have this like poker analogy where, like, when you see people playing poker on TV and you get the percentages of like who's more likely to win the hand, and then it's changing as the river and the flop and everything are coming out. That's kind of how I see our combat loop. And it's like, people get into an engagement and you go, okay, based on the fit and based on the position, that guy's got like an 80-20 chance of winning this situation. And then you're going to be playing your tactical equipment, you're going to be doing scanning, you're going to be doing disruption, and it's kind of swinging those advantages backwards and forwards before someone kind of makes their first move. It's very kind of abstract, and it's very kind of idealistic in the way that like gameplay actually plays out, but that's kind of where I want to move it towards. So stuff like scanning and disruption and stuff has to kind of be a part of the loop for that to work. So absolutely, like it's not like we're just throwing the whole idea of all of that information gathering out of the way. That's definitely where we're trying to move.
Excellent. And that question came from Denny, so a very old school Dust player, so I'm pretty sure he'll appreciate that answer.
Yes, thank you, Denny.
But excellent. I think that wraps up the Q&A then. I hope you all thoroughly enjoyed it. We will, of course, upload this to YouTube as well for those of you that were having a little difficulty listening or you not being able to make it. But otherwise, stay tuned. We'll probably get an announcement out soon in relation to the next podcast and what we'll be covering in that. And then the Q&A will follow as soon as that gets published. So you'll have a chance to submit your questions again in the Q&A submissions channel. But thank you both for joining me. This was really informative.
Yeah,
anytime.
Pleasure to be involved. I'm going to spend the rest of my Friday probably just like lurking and chatting in the Discord.
Yeah.
If people want to just chat, new weapons and stuff, because we're like between me and Vipex, like we're going through and we're still in that very kind of much ideation phase where we're just throwing ideas at a wall and seeing what sticks and seeing what goes on all these axes of potential rosters and things that we're doing. So yeah, I'd love to hear people's opinions about what they think would just be cool weapons that they liked from Dust and from other games. Like, yeah, I'm going to be around. So if people want to chat, I'll be in the which is the best place to be for that stuff? There's so many channels in here.
I would say forums.
Just Vangos? Or...
Yeah,
okay, forums.
I would say
Cool.
forums. There's a section for feedback. If people want to provide some detailed feedback in a thread, then head to the forums here on the Discord. I think there is already some really good ideas in there already. As I said, Levi's been making a bunch of different images and stuff, which have been fantastic. Don't have to make images. You can literally just have an open chat, as Massey just said. He'd be more than welcome to answer any questions and get some brainstorming on the go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. There was another question. Sorry, there was one last question. It was, when is CCP going to hire Possum? I was gonna offer Possum a job, but he's not actually attended the Q&A, so he's missed this opportunity. Sorry, okay. Possum. Yep. Unfortunately, the position has been filled by someone else now. So, all the best. Thank you all for joining. I'll see you all soon.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.